My name is Margaret, and not too long ago, I stood in a grocery store checkout line with exactly $27 in my wallet, and a decision to make that I never expected would change my life. At 64, I thought I knew what my days would look like. A small rented apartment in a quiet Ohio town, a fixed Social Security check, a part-time job at the library, and a constant mental calculator running in the back of my mind every time I picked something up off a shelf. I wasn't miserable, but I was careful. Very, very careful. I'd been a bookkeeper for most of my working years. Numbers and I understood each other. They didn't lie. They didn't sugarcoat. They just sat there on paper and told you exactly what was possible and what wasn't. And lately, those numbers had been very clear with me. There was no room for surprises. That morning started like a lot of my mornings do. I woke up to the soft rattle of the old radiator in my bedroom and the pale gray light sneaking in around the edges of the curtains. My knees protested a little as I swung my legs out of bed, and I sat there for a moment, letting my joints catch up with the rest of me. Then I reached for my robe, slipped my feet into my house shoes, and shuffled over to the tiny kitchen that has seen more microwave dinners than home-cooked meals these last few years. Put on a pot of coffee, cheap but strong, and pulled my little spiral notebook from the top of the fridge. On the front, in my own looping handwriting, it says lists, because I've always believed that if you can write something down, you can manage it. Inside, the first page of each week is my budget. Rent, utilities, phone, prescriptions, bus pass, groceries. I had already gone over it twice the night before, but I checked it again anyway. Old habits. I traced the numbers with my finger. Left after bills, $82. Set aside for emergency savings, $40. That leaves $42 for groceries and anything else that might come up. I'd already used 15 of that for a copy at the doctor's office earlier in the week, which meant that today, walking to the store, I had $27 to spend on food until my check came in again. I know some people would panic at that. Believe me, younger me would have too. But after a few lean years, your brain starts to quietly adjust. You learn where the cheaper store brands are. You learn which days they mark down the bread. You learn to make soup out of almost anything. Still, $27 doesn't stretch as far as it used to. I knew that, standing there with the pen poised over the page. Okay, I murmured to myself, taking a sip of coffee. Let S be smart. I wrote groceries at the top of a new page and started listing. Milk, eggs, bread, oats, bananas, chicken if on sale, beans, rice. My pen hovered for a second over the last blank line. I thought about adding cookies or chocolate or ice cream, something small and sweet that would make the evenings feel less lonely. Instead, I wrote treat with a question mark and underlined it twice. We'll see, I told myself. After a quick shower and a simple breakfast, I tucked my worn wallet into my purse, pulled on my heaviest coat. Winter was thinking about coming back, whether I liked it or not, and wrapped a scarf around my neck. The grocery store was only 4 blocks away, an easy walk when you're not carrying anything. A bit harder on the way back, but manageable if you don't let yourself get carried away. The air outside had that damp, late winter chill that seeps through your sleeves. Tucked my hands into my pockets and walked, watching my breath puff out in front of me. I passed the little park with its bare trees and empty benches, the nail salon that always smelled like strong chemicals, the diner that still had a breakfast special $4.99 sign in the window. For a moment, I imagined myself inside that diner, sitting at the counter with a plate of pancakes and bacon, listening to the murmur of other people's conversations. Then I pushed the thought away. Pancakes at home were cheaper. The automatic doors at the grocery store slid open with a soft whoosh, letting out a breath of warmer air that smelled like coffee, produce, and floor cleaner. I grabbed a small cart instead of a large one for some reason. It was easier to keep myself from overspending if the cart looked a little empty. I went through my list like it was a test. Milk store brand, not the pretty bottle with the green label. Eggs large, but not free range. Bread whatever was on sale with a yellow tag. I compared prices on oatmeal, choosing the big tub instead of the fancy flavored packets. In the produce section, I picked up a bunch of bananas, checked the price, and then picked up a smaller bunch. It's funny, the things you notice when you're counting every penny. I noticed a young couple arguing softly over brands, a mother shushing a toddler who desperately wanted a bright blue cereal, an elderly man standing in front of the soup display for so long that I wondered if he'd forgotten why he was there. As I rounded the corner toward the meat section, I saw the sign I'd been hoping for. Chicken thighs, family pack sale. I did the math in my head and decided I could swing it if I went light on something else. Chicken thighs could become soup, stir fry, and leftover sandwiches if I planned right. By the time I'd finished, the cart held exactly what I needed and nothing I didn't. The only indulgence I'd allowed myself was a small bag of off-brand cookies, the kind my mother used to buy when I was a girl. I'd stood staring at them for a full 30 seconds before dropping them into the cart. Life's too short, I'd muttered under my breath, even on a budget. As I got in line at the register, I did a quick recap in my head. I knew roughly what each item cost. I'd kept a running total as I went, adding tax, rounding up. I was fairly sure I was just under $27, but I still felt that familiar tightness in my chest as I waited, fingers pressing lightly on the handle of the cart. The line in front of me moved slowly. A man in a suit argued about a coupon. Woman with 2 restless kids bought what looked like a week's worth of food. I tried to distract myself by studying the magazines and candy bars by the conveyor belt. I didn't notice the man behind me until I heard the soft jangle of dog tags and the faint, uneven scrape of his shoes. I turned my head slightly. He was probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, though it was hard to tell. A little younger than me, but worn in a different way. His coat was clean but faded, a military-style jacket with a small, frayed patch on the sleeve. On his head, he wore a cap with a familiar logo, a bald eagle and the words U.S. Army Veteran. He held a small basket with only a few items inside: bread, peanut butter, a can of soup, and a box of instant coffee. His hands, rough and chapped from the cold, gripped the handle. As he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, I heard it again, the soft clink of metal tags on a chain under his shirt. Our eyes met for just a second. He gave me a polite, tight-lipped smile and then looked away, as if he was used to keeping his distance. Something in my chest tugged. I turned back to the front just as it was my turn to unload my cart. I placed each item on the conveyor belt carefully, grouping them together: cold items, pantry items, the single small bag of cookies at the very end. "Morning," the cashier said, not quite looking at me as she started scanning. "Morning," I replied. The numbers on the display started climbing. I watched them the way I used to watch the odometer on long car trips, each click bringing me closer to destination I wasn't sure I was ready for. 25.72, the cashier said finally. Let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I opened my wallet, pulled out a 20 and a 5, and slid them across. I could have used the coins to cover the rest, but instead, I pulled out my other bill, the last one, a crisp $20 note. I hesitated for a moment, then tucked it back and fished around in the change pocket, coming up with 75 cents in coins. I handed them over, took my receipt, and started putting my groceries back into the cart. Behind me, I heard the cashier say, "Next." The veteran stepped forward and began placing his items on the belt. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he was buying something far heavier than bread and soup. I was about to push my cart forward when I heard the cashier say, flatly, "That's $17.89. There was a pause. Can you take off the coffee?" he asked quietly. I froze. I pretended to rearrange the bags in my cart so I could listen without looking like I was listening. Cashier sighed and removed the box of coffee, rescanning the remaining items. $13.20, she said. Another pause. And the soup too, I guess, he murmured. I glanced up just in time to see him counting out a few crumpled bills and a small handful of coins on the counter. His shoulders hunched in, like he was trying to make himself smaller. Something twisted in my chest, sharp and familiar. I've been there. Maybe not in that exact position, but close enough. Standing under bright store lights, doing math in my head, silently deciding which things I can live without. Feeling that quiet shame rise up, not because I've done anything wrong, but because the world doesn't make much room for people who are just barely getting by. The cashier removed the can of soup, rescanned, and announced the new total. He slid the bills forward, eyes fixed on his hands. I saw him hesitate before giving up his last 2 quarters, then leaving a lone penny behind on the counter. Wasn't buying coffee now, or soup, just bread and peanut butter. My hand went automatically to my purse. $20, that's what was left. My emergency cushion, the thing between me and having nothing until my next check. I thought of the little note in my notebook where I'd written, set aside, $40. I'd already cut that in half for the doctor's visit. Now I was down to $20. $20 doesn't sound like much. Some people, it's an impulse buy, a lunch out, a couple of coffees, and a pastry. To me, that week, it was what if the power bill is higher than I expected? Or what if I need a prescription filled sooner than planned? It was breathing room. The veteran cleared his throat, a rough sound, and reached for a small bag of groceries. I don't know exactly what happened in my mind in the next moment. There wasn't a grand voice from the heavens. There was just this very quiet, very stubborn thought. He's someone's son, someone's brother, maybe someone's father. He served, and he's giving up coffee and soup to make bread and peanut butter work. Before I could talk myself out of it, I heard my own voice. Excuse me. Both the cashier and the veteran looked up. I stepped a little closer to the counter, my heart pounding. I'd like to pay for his things, I said. My words sounded too loud in my own ears. Cashier blinked, and the veteran turned to stare at me, eyes wide. Oh, that's okay, ma'am, he said quickly, shaking his head. You don't have to do that. I know, I said. I want to. My fingers were already in my purse, pulling out that last $20 bill. I smoothed it on the counter and slid it toward the cashier before I could lose my nerve. The veteran looked from the bill to my face. Really, he started. It's all right, I said gently. I've had people help me out before. Consider it my way of passing it on. The cashier, seeing that I meant it, shrugged, took the bill, and punched a few buttons on the register. Your total's covered, she told him. Do you want the soup and coffee back on there? He swallowed, then nodded slowly. Yes, please, he said, his voice a little hoarse. She rescanned them, and the numbers on the screen jumped. There was still enough left from the 20. She counted out the few dollars of change and set them on the counter. For a second, he didn't move, as if he was trying to understand what was happening. Then he picked up the coins with shaking fingers and turned to me. I don't know how to thank you, he said quietly. His eyes were wet now, and up close I could see the deep lines at the corners, the faint scars along his jaw, the way his hair was thinner at the temples. You just did, I replied. And if life gives you the chance someday, you can do something kind for someone else. He studied my face, like he was trying to memorize it. Ma'am, he said, my name is Daniel. I won't forget this. Margaret, I said. Nice to meet you, Daniel. He shifted his bag to his other hand and gave me a little half salute, half wave. God bless you, Margaret, he said. I felt my cheeks flush. You take care now, I murmured. He walked away, moving a little straighter than he had when he'd come in. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of warmth and mild panic settle in my stomach. As I pushed my cart out into the chilly air, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me, that familiar bookkeeper part of my brain woke back up. You just gave away your last $20, Margaret. The numbers started shifting again. No emergency cushion. No room for surprises. If anything went wrong before my next check, I'd figure something out. I always did, but still. I tightened my grip on the cart handle and took a deep breath. Relax, I told myself as I started the walk home. You still have food, the bills are paid. You did something good. That has to count for something. Does it though? A quieter voice asked. Does it really count for anything? Or do you just end up a little poorer and a little more anxious? I wish I could tell you I brushed that thought aside with saintly confidence. I didn't. Walked home in the cold, groceries rattling in the cart, heart pulled between the glow of having helped someone and the worry of what might happen if life decided to be unkind in the next few days. By the time I got back to my apartment, my fingers were numb from the cold, and my lower back was making its opinion about the walk very clear. I put the groceries away slowly, lining up the cans, tucking the chicken into the freezer, placing the little bag of cookies in the cupboard like a hidden treasure. When I finally sat down at my small kitchen table, I pulled out my notebook again. In the margin next to set aside, $40, I wrote 20 vet and circled it. Then, without thinking too hard, I added one more word, worth it. I stared at those two words for a long time. Was it? I didn't know. All I knew was that when I looked back on this day years from now, I wanted to remember that once, when it would have been easy to look away, I didn't. Night, as I lay in bed listening to the radiator hiss and pop, my mind replayed the moment at the register. The way Daniel's face had softened, the way his voice had trembled when he said my name, the little salute. It felt good. It also felt scary. I had no idea that the next morning, my phone would ring with news that would make that $20 bill feel like the beginning of a much bigger story. The next morning started out as plain as toast. I woke up at my usual time, a little before 7, to the soft hiss of the radiator and the pale light working its way around the edges of the blinds. For a few seconds, I lay there under the covers, listening to the familiar sounds of the building, the muffled thump of someone's television upstairs, the distant bark of a dog, the pipes groaning as the first showers of the day started. Then yesterday came back to me. The grocery store, the veteran's worn jacket, way his voice had caught when he said, I won't forget this, and the $20 bill sliding away from me across the counter. My first thought, if I'm being honest, was a small, nervous flutter in my stomach. I pictured my notebook with the little 20 vet note next to my emergency savings and wondered if the universe keeps track of these things or if it just does. Too late to take it back now, I muttered to myself, throwing back the covers. Let's see what today wants. I shuffled into the kitchen, my slippers whispering against the linoleum. The sunlight was trying its best to cheer the small space, bouncing off the white cabinets and the chrome on the old stove. I filled the coffee maker, measured out the grounds, and pushed the button. The machine sputtered to life with its familiar growl. While it brewed, I took my notebook from the counter and flipped it open to yesterday's page. The words were exactly as I'd left them. Set aside, $20, doctor, 20, vet, worth it. I traced my finger over the last two words. The ink hadn't magically turned into anything else overnight. No glowing halo around it. Just ink. Just a choice I'd already made. Please let it have been worth it, I whispered. The coffee finished with a small, satisfied sigh. I poured myself a mug, added just a splash of milk, and carried it to the table. The chair creaked under me as I sat, and for a few minutes, I did nothing but wrap my hands around the warm ceramic and look out the window. Traffic moved slowly along the street below. A woman in a bright blue coat walked her dog, the little thing trotting at her heels, with more energy than I'd had in years. The sky was the same dull winter white as yesterday, neither threatening snow nor promising sun. Another ordinary day, I said out loud, just to break the silence. I'd barely taken my first sip of coffee when my phone buzzed against the table, making me jump. It's an older model, the kind with a slightly scratched screen and a battery that likes to give up at the worst times, and it doesn't ring often. At that hour, calls usually meant one of three things: my sister, a telemarketer, or a doctor's office. I slid it closer and glanced at the display. Unknown number. I frowned. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. I've had my fill of people trying to sell me things I don't need and can't afford. But something nudged me to answer. "Hello," I said hesitantly. "Good morning. May I speak with Margaret Thompson, please?" A woman's voice asked, crisp but not unkind. "This is she," I replied, sitting up a little straighter. "Hi, Miss Thompson. My name is Erin, and I'm calling from the Lakeside Community Support Center. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" The name rang a faint bell. I furrowed my brow. "I think I've heard of you," I said slowly. "You help folks around here, don't you?" "That's right," she said. "We coordinate several local aid programs. I'm calling today about an application we received on your behalf." "On my behalf," I repeated. "I haven't filled out any applications." "I understand," she said quickly. "Let me explain. We partner with several organizations and donors in the area who refer people to us, people they believe might benefit from a little financial breathing room. Someone submitted your name and basic information yesterday with permission to contact you. They requested that, if you qualified, we prioritize your case." My mind scrambled to keep up. Requested. From where? I stopped, a thought flickering to life. "Yesterday." "Yes, ma'am," she said. "The referral came in late afternoon." Late afternoon. I closed my eyes for a second and saw the grocery store again. The faded jacket, the army cap, the soft clink of dog tags. "Do you happen to know who sent that referral?" I asked, even though I already had a guess. There was a short pause, papers shuffling faintly on her end of the line. "I can't share personal details about the referring party," she said, "but I can tell you it was an individual donor who identified himself as a veteran." My breath caught. "Daniel." "I see," I murmured. Erin continued, unaware of the storm of feelings waking up inside me. "Reason for my call," she said, "is that we've reviewed the information available: your age, income level, housing situation, and you meet the criteria for our Senior Stability Grant. It's designed to help older adults on fixed incomes cover essential needs and reduce the risk of housing or food insecurity." I gripped the edge of the table with my free hand. "Grant," I echoed. "What does that mean?" "Means," she said, and I could hear a smile in her voice now, "that you've been approved for a one-time assistance amount of $2,000, along with 3 months of supplemental grocery support in the form of store vouchers. There's also an option, if you choose, for us to connect you with our financial counseling partner, who can help you set up a basic emergency savings plan." $2,000. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. Floated above me like numbers on a screen, disconnected from reality. "Miss Thompson," she prompted gently. "Are you still there?" I think so," I said, my voice sounding odd to my own ears. "Did you say $2,000? "Yes, ma'am," she replied. "It may actually be a little more, depending on how your next utility cycle looks. We can factor that in when you come in to sign the paperwork." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the far wall as if it might offer some guidance. My brain did what it always does. It started doing math. $2,000. That's several months of rent. That's paying off the lingering medical bill I'd been slowly chipping away at. That's groceries without fear. That's breathing room. I managed, then stopped, unable to find the right word. "Overwhelming," she offered kindly. I let out a shaky laugh. "Yes," I said, "in the best possible way." "I understand," she said. "We don't expect you to make any decisions over the phone. My goal today is just to explain what's available, and if you're willing, schedule a time for you to come in. We'll go over everything in person, answer all your questions, and you won't be pressured into anything you're not comfortable with." A memory surfaced me yesterday, telling Daniel he could pass the kindness on someday if life gave him the chance. It seems life didn't wait very long. "Is there a cost?" I asked cautiously. To come in, I mean. I don't have extra. No cost at all, she assured me. We're a nonprofit. This money has already been donated for this exact purpose. It's set aside for people like you. People like you. For most of my life, that phrase has come with a weight to it. People like you means people who have to be careful, who don't get the fancy things, who need to always think 2 steps ahead. Hearing it now attached to help instead of limitation felt new. I took a deep breath. All right, I said. What do you need from me? For the next few minutes, we went over details. She confirmed my address, explained what documents I'd need to bring, a photo ID, proof of income, a recent utility bill. We settled on an appointment time for the following afternoon. Her voice stayed calm and patient the whole way through. Before we finish, she said, I just want you to know these grants don't appear out of nowhere. Someone saw you, thought of you, and chose to act. Honored to be the bridge between that generosity and your peace of mind. My eyes stung. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Miss Thompson, she replied. We'll see you tomorrow at 2. When the call ended, the apartment felt strangely silent, like the air was trying to catch up with what had just happened. I set the phone down carefully, as if any sudden movement might make the whole thing vanish. $2,000. I said it out loud, just to test the sound. $1,000. The words tasted unreal. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the table. The sunlight had shifted, laying a bright rectangle across my notebook. I picked up my pen with trembling fingers and opened to a new page. At the top, I wrote Grant with a question mark. Underneath, I scribbled the words Lakeside Community Support Center 2 p.m. tomorrow and circled it. Then, almost without thinking, I flipped back to yesterday's page and underlined worth it. I couldn't prove any of it. Not really. Maybe the referral would have come some other way. Maybe someone else had already been thinking of my name. But in my heart, it felt linked. One day, I give away $20 I can barely spare. The next morning, I wake up to an offer for help that was already in motion. Karma, God, the universe, good people doing good things. I'm not picky about what you call it. All I knew was that kindness had moved in a circle, and somehow, I'd ended up standing right where it came back around. The rest of that day passed in a strange, hazy mix of normal chores and sudden bursts of disbelief. I did the dishes. I folded laundry. I straightened the pile of mail on the counter. And every so often, I'd stop and think $2,000 and feel my heart skip. That evening, I called my younger sister, Ruth. Lives 2 states away with her husband in a tidy little house with a porch swing and a vegetable garden. We talk often, but I haven't told her every detail of my finances. She worries enough already. Hey, big sis, she said when she picked up, the familiar warmth in her voice making my shoulders relax. Hey, Ruthie, I replied. Got a minute? For you, always, she said. What's going on? I told her the whole story. The grocery store, the veteran, the $20, the phone call, the grant. He listened without interrupting, which is rare for Ruth. I could picture her in her kitchen, probably leaning against the counter with her hand over her mouth. When I finished, there was a long pause. Well, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. If that's not proof the universe is paying attention, I don't know what is. You really think so? I asked, suddenly feeling shy about the whole thing. Margaret, she said firmly, you have spent your whole life doing the right thing, even when nobody was looking. You've taken care of people. You've gone without so others didn't have to. You gave away your last bit of wiggle room to make sure that man could eat with dignity. I'm not the least bit surprised something good found its way back to you. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I kept thinking, I admitted, what if I need that money? What if something goes wrong? And then I thought, what if he needs it more? I still had food. I still had a roof. I don't know. It just felt like the right thing in that moment. It was, she said. And now look, $2,000. And groceries. I am so happy for you. We talked for a while longer about what I might do with the money. Pay off that hospital bill first, Ruth said. Get that monkey off your back. Then maybe set aside a bit, like they suggested. And for heaven's sake, Margaret, buy yourself something that isn't on the clearance rack. I laughed. We'll see, I said, one step at a time. Night when I went to bed, the worry that usually settled on my chest like a heavy blanket felt lighter. Not gone, old habits die hard, but lighter. I thought of Daniel, wherever he was. Had he already forgotten our brief encounter? Was he sitting in his own kitchen, maybe with a proper cup of coffee and a bowl of soup this time, feeling a little less alone because someone had seen him? I hope so. God bless you too, Daniel, I whispered into the dark. Next day, I put on my best blouse, the one without any fraying at the cuffs, and the dark slacks I reserve for church and important appointments. I even added a bit of lipstick, more for my own confidence than anyone else's. As I checked my reflection in the small mirror by the door, I saw a woman who looked a little surprised by her own face. You're allowed this, I told my reflection quietly. You're allowed to accept help. The bus ride to the Lakeside Community Support Center took about 20 minutes. I watched the town roll by through the smudged window, the same streets I'd walked and driven for years, suddenly feeling a little different, as if I were seeing them from a step to the side. The center itself was housed in a low, brick building that used to be a small clinic. A new sign over the door read, Lakeside Community Support Center, in blue letters, with a simple logo of two hands overlapping. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, and the waiting area had worn but clean chairs, a table stacked with brochures, and a bulletin board covered in flyers. A young man at the front desk greeted me with a smile. Hi there, he said. How can we help you today? I'm Margaret Thompson, I said. I have an appointment with Erin at 2. He checked the computer and nodded. You're right on time, he said. Have a seat, she'll be right out. Perched on the edge of one of the chairs, clutching my purse in my lap like it might float away if I loosened my grip. Around me, a few other people waited, an older gentleman staring at the floor, a young woman with a toddler trying to keep him occupied with a toy car, a middle-aged woman flipping through a magazine without really seeing it. After a few minutes, a woman in her 30s with a simple blouse, dark blazer, and kind eyes stepped into the waiting area, a folder in her hand. Miss Thompson? She asked, looking around. I stood. That's me, I said. She smiled. Hi, I'm Erin, she said, offering her hand. It's nice to meet you in person. Come on back. Her office was small but tidy, with a window that looked out over the parking lot, a pair of chairs, and a desk piled neatly with papers and a potted plant. Can I get you some water, coffee? She asked as I sat. Water would be nice, I said. He handed me a paper cup, then settled into her own chair, opening the folder with my name on it. First of all, she said, I want to thank you for coming in. I know it can feel strange or even uncomfortable to walk into a place like this. A lot of people tell me they don't like to ask for help. I didn't ask, I pointed out. That's the funny thing, she nodded. Yes, she said. In your case, someone else raised their hand on your behalf. That's actually more common than you'd think. Often, people who give quietly are the last ones to step forward when they're the ones in need. Her eyes were gentle, but I still felt heat rise in my cheeks. I wouldn't say I'm in need, I said slowly. Just careful. Careful is good, she said. This is about giving you a little space so that careful doesn't have to mean constantly scared. She walked me through the grant details again, this time with papers in front of us. Senior Stability Grant is funded by a combination of local donors and partner organizations, she explained. In your case, you've been approved for $2,300. That breaks down like this. A lump sum payment to help you clear any urgent bills, plus grocery vouchers spread across the next 3 months. $2,300, I repeated, my heart doing a small flip. Yes, she said. We adjusted the amount after looking at your rent and average utilities. You want to make sure you have enough to breathe, not just to plug one hole and leave another. She pointed to a simple chart with line items: rent cushion, medical balance, groceries, emergency savings. We also partner with a financial counselor who will meet with you for free, she continued. They can help you set up a separate savings account, talk through your budget, and make a plan that works for you so this grant has a lasting impact. I stared at the numbers, then at her. All this, I said slowly, because someone gave you my name. In part, yes, she said. The referral put your situation on our radar. The rest is our standard process. But I'll be honest, having a strong referral often pushes a case to the top of the stack more quickly. I thought again of Daniel filling out some kind of form, or maybe making a phone call, telling someone, there's this lady at the store. Her name is Margaret. She helped me when she didn't have to. Ever tell people who referred them? I asked. She shook her head. Not by name, she said. We protect privacy on both sides. But I can tell you this much. From the note in your file, it's someone who respects you deeply. They described you as a kind older woman who helped me buy food when she clearly didn't have much herself. Emotion rose up like a wave. I swallowed hard and blinked fast. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to say anything right now, she said gently. If you'd like to accept the grant, we'll sign a few forms, and the funds can be available within a few days. The grocery vouchers will be active immediately. This isn't a loan. You don't have to pay it back. There are no strings attached. No strings attached. I thought of all the times in my life when help came with strings, favors owed, expectations attached, quiet resentments. This was different. This was clean. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the pen in my hand as she slid the paperwork toward me. Yesterday, I had given away $20 I could scarcely afford. Today, the world was offering me more than 100 times that amount. And yet, the hardest part was still this, letting myself believe I deserved it. The pen felt heavier than it had any right to. It wasn't fancy, just a simple black ballpoint with the center's logo on the side. But as I held it over the signature line, my hand trembled slightly. Erin waited quietly across from me, giving me space. She'd already explained every clause, every box, every you are not required to, and this will not affect. There were no surprises hiding in the fine print. The only thing left was my own hesitation. I've spent my whole life making sure I didn't take more than my share, I said softly, more to myself than to her. I hear that a lot, she replied. But I want you to remember something. This isn't taking. This is receiving something that was created for you. This money is already here. If you don't accept it, it doesn't magically go to someone more deserving. It just sits until we find another Margaret. And I promise you, the person who referred you didn't do it so you could keep struggling. I thought of Daniel's face again. The relief when the coffee and soup went back onto the belt. The way he'd said, I won't forget this. Do you think, I began, then stopped. Do you think he knows what this turned into? She smiled. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. Often the people who start a chain of kindness never see the full circle. But that doesn't make it any less real. I looked down at the paper again. Approved amount. $2,300 in my mind. The numbers shuffled themselves into images. The overdue medical bill stamped paid in full. A current rent receipt with no red circle around it. A grocery cart that held more than just the bare minimum. A small savings account that wasn't just a wish on paper. I took a slow breath, steadied my hand, and signed. As the pen moved across the page, something inside me loosened, a knot I hadn't realized was so tight. Years, my life had been about making do, making less look like enough, making myself as small a burden as possible. In that small office, with that simple signature, I chose something different. I chose to accept that I was allowed to be cared for, just as I had cared for others. Erin took the pen back gently, as if she understood the weight of what had just happened. She added her own signature, stamped a few sections, then looked up with a warm smile. Congratulations, Miss Thompson, she said. We'll process this today. You should see the funds in your account within 3 business days. Here are your first grocery vouchers. They're active immediately. And this is the card for the financial counselor. You can call to schedule when you're ready." She slid a small stack of neatly arranged papers toward me, along with 3 colorful cards, each labeled $100 grocery credit. I picked one up, running my thumb over the smooth surface. "This doesn't feel real," I admitted. "It is," she said. "You're not alone in feeling that way. Take your time adjusting. You don't have to use it all at once. Just know it's there for you." As I left the center, the air outside felt different. The sky was still gray, the parking lot still cracked in places, the traffic still moving at the same slow pace, but I felt taller somehow, like I wasn't hunched over against the weight of worry. On the bus ride home, I sat by the window and watched familiar storefronts pass by. The thrift shop where I'd bought most of my clothes, the pharmacy where I rationed my refills, the little bakery I rarely let myself enter because the smell alone felt like a temptation. Today, for the first time in a long time, those places didn't look like traps waiting to drain me. They just looked like part of a world I was still allowed to enjoy. When I got back to my apartment, I set the paperwork on the table and made myself a cup of tea. Steam curled up in front of my face, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I allowed myself to daydream. If someone had watched me from outside, they would have just seen an older woman staring at a stack of papers. But inside, my mind was busy. I pictured walking into the grocery store without that tightness in my chest. I saw myself picking up a carton of berries without checking 3 different price tags first. I imagined paying the electric bill the day it arrived, instead of waiting until the last possible moment. And then, tentatively, I imagined more. A new pair of shoes that didn't pinch my toes. A bus ticket to visit Ruth for longer than a quick weekend. Maybe even a small contribution to the community center that had just helped me, so someone else could feel the same relief someday. I wasn't planning a life of luxury. I wasn't imagining cruises or fancy restaurants. What I was imagining was something much more precious to me, not being afraid all the time. That night, as I got ready for bed, I walked past the small mirror in the hallway and caught my reflection. For a moment, I stopped and really looked. The lines on my face were still there, earned honestly by years of smiles and frowns and ordinary days. My hair was still more gray than anything else, but my eyes looked different, softer, less tired. "Look at you," I said quietly. "Still here, still standing, still worth helping." I slept better that night than I had in months. A few days later, I went back to the grocery store, grocery vouchers tucked safely into my purse. The automatic doors opened with the same soft whoosh. The air inside still smelled like produce and coffee and cleaner, and the fluorescent lights still hummed overhead. But my heart was quieter. I grabbed a cart and moved through the aisles with more ease. I still compared prices, old habits again, but I didn't grip the cart handle so tightly. I chose the good bread instead of the cheapest. I added fresh vegetables and a little container of pre-cut fruit that I would have once dismissed as too fancy. When I reached the cookie aisle, I paused, smiled, and picked out a box that reminded me of the ones my grandmother used to keep in a tin on the top shelf. At the checkout, I glanced briefly at the other lanes, half hoping, half afraid I might see Daniel again. I didn't. Just a teenager in a sweatshirt, a tired mother, an older man with a newspaper tucked under his arm. When it was my turn, I unloaded my items and watched the total climb. My stomach didn't twist this time. When the cashier announced the amount, I handed her one of the grocery vouchers and a small bill to cover the difference. She scanned it, nodded, and handed me the receipt. "Nice savings," she said casually. "Yes," I replied, smiling. "Very nice." On the walk home, bags a little heavier, but my step a little lighter, I thought about how quickly things can change. One day, you're circling treat on a list and choosing to give your last cushion to a stranger. The next, you're walking home with more than you thought you could have, and a bit of hope tucked quietly into your chest. In the weeks that followed, the grant did exactly what it was meant to do. Paid off the lingering medical bill that had been hanging over me like a cloud. I caught up on utilities and even put a small credit on one account, just to see what it felt like to be ahead instead of behind. With the help of the financial counselor, I opened a separate savings account and deposited a small amount, promising myself I'd add to it regularly, even if it was just a few dollars at a time. The grocery vouchers kept my pantry full without the constant mental arithmetic. For the first time in a long time, I could open my fridge and see not just ingredients for survival, but ingredients for comfort. Soup with fresh vegetables, oatmeal with fruit, a cup of coffee in the afternoon, just because I wanted one. And every single time I used one of those vouchers, every time I saw the balance in my bank account and realized I didn't have to panic, my mind went back to that moment at the checkout line, to the worn jacket, to the soft clink of dog tags, the way he'd said, "God bless you, Margaret." I never did run into Daniel again. Sometimes I'd catch myself scanning faces at the bus stop or in the canned goods aisle, wondering if one of them might be his. I thought about leaving a note at the community center, asking them to tell him thank you if he ever came by. But in the end, I decided against it, because the truth is, he'd already done what he could. He'd taken a small kindness and turned it into a bigger one. Dee told someone about me. That was enough. One Sunday, sitting in the back pew of my little church, the pastor gave a sermon about casting your bread upon the waters, about how the good we send out has a way of returning to us in ways we can't expect or control. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. After the service, as people milled around shaking hands and chatting, a woman I barely knew came up to me. "I heard," she said softly, "about the grant. I volunteer at Lakeside sometimes. I just wanted to say, I'm glad it went to someone like you. Someone like you." There was that phrase again. This time, it felt less like a label and more like a blessing. "Thank you," I said. "I'm glad too." Months have passed now since that day at the grocery store. Life hasn't turned magically perfect. My knees still ache when it rains. Prices still climb faster than I'd like. I still clip coupons out of habit and feel a little thrill when I find a really good sale. But I don't live with that tight band of fear around my chest anymore. I don't lie awake quite as often, staring at the ceiling and wondering what will happen if just one thing goes wrong. There's cushion now. There's room. There's also something else, a deeper belief that what we do matters, even when it's small. Especially when it's small. We live in a world that loves big gestures and dramatic stories. We share videos of surprise checks and viral fundraisers and enormous donations, which are all wonderful, of course. But I've come to believe that the quieter moments are just as powerful. A $20 bill at a grocery store, a phone call made on someone else's behalf, a grant written into existence by people who will never meet the person it helps. Kindness isn't a straight line. It's a circle. Sometimes it takes years to come back around. Sometimes, as in my case, it happens almost overnight. Whenever it returns, whether through money or support, or a simple word that arrives exactly when you need it, it carries with it the echo of every small choice that set it in motion. If you're listening to my story today, maybe you've had your own $20 moment. Maybe you gave time you couldn't spare, love you weren't sure would be returned, or help that cost you more than you let on. Maybe you're still waiting to see if any of that will ever come back to you. From one cautious, tender-hearted woman to another, let me say this: it matters. Even if you never see the results with your own eyes, it matters. You changed someone's day. Maybe you changed their life. Maybe you changed the way they see themselves, or the world, or what's possible. And maybe, just maybe, they carried that change forward into someone else's life, the way Daniel did into mine. I used to think my story would always be about making do with less. Now, when I look back, I see something different woven through it, a thread of giving and receiving, of sacrifice and surprise, of fear and faith and unexpected abundance. I gave away my grocery money to a vet. The next day changed my fate. $20 of kindness returned as thousands. Yes, but more importantly, it returned as peace of mind, as proof that I wasn't as alone as I'd quietly feared, as a reminder that the universe still has room for grace. As you go back to your own day, maybe standing at your own kitchen counter or sitting in your favorite chair, I hope you'll hold on to this thought. The smallest kindness you offer, especially when it costs you something, is never wasted. It may travel farther than you think. It may circle through other hands and other hearts. And one day, perhaps when you least expect it, you might feel its echo coming back to you in a form you never saw coming. Until then, keep being the kind of person who helps the veteran in line, who sees the quiet struggle, who chooses generosity over fear when you can. Because somewhere out there, someone like me is writing worth it in the margin of their own story, thanks to someone like you.